Letter 7. My dear Father, you will recollect that in my last epistle I made mention of our intention to go to Gilgal, where John, the betrothed of Mary, was to meet us and accompany us to Jordan. It was faint dawn when we rose from our couches to prepare for the journey. The mules upon which we were to ride were brought into the court by the 2 swarthy Gibeonite serfs whom Rabbi Amos holds in his service, and caparisoned with rich saddles covered with Persian saddlecloths embroidered with gold. The 2 pack mules were also made ready, on one of which was the traveling equipage of my cousin Mary and myself, which Rabbi Amos smilingly said took up more space than the goods and traveling wares of a Damascus merchant. At sunrise, after we had kneeled upon the housetop in view of the temple, and sent up our prayers with its sacrifices and clouds of ascending incense, we descended to the courtyard to mount for the road. The morning was bright and cheerful, with the golden sun pouring its light over temple and tower, castle and roof, wall and rampart, hill and grove, valley and brook. As we turned the street leading to the sheep gate, we passed the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, whom I saw standing upon the marble porch of his superb palace. He was not arrayed in his sumptuous robes with a breastplate of dazzling stones and kingly cap, as I had seen him in the temple, but was dressed in a flowing black robe, over which was thrown a scarf of white linen, and upon his snow-white locks he wore a scarlet hood, a dress common to all the priests, so that if I had not recognized him by his tall and commanding form and flowing white hair and piercing eye as he surveyed us, I should have known that it was the high priest. A little further on we met a party coming from the country beyond Kedron, with large cages upon their mules, laden with turtle doves and young pigeons, which they were carrying to the temple to be sold there for sacrifices. My heart pitied the innocent things, whose blue, pretty heads were thrust by the dozen through the rough bars of their prison houses, as they cast their soft eyes up at me, as if asking me to deliver them from their bondage. As Mary was riding behind me, in order to let the laden mules pass with their immense cages, one of the turtle doves, affrighted by the noise of the streets, extricated itself from between the bars, and spreading its wings flew into the air, and then, taking its flight for the country, soared far above the city walls and disappeared in the distance. I felt rejoiced at the innocent bird's escape, and sent my good wishes for its safe return to its lodge in the wilderness. Just before we reached the sheep gate, by which we were to gain the Jericho road, we met a poor blind man leading a lamb, or rather being led by a tame lamb. He also had 2 pigeons in his bosom. He was asked by Rabbi Amos, who knew him, whither he was going. He answered that he was going to the temple to sacrifice them. "Nay," said Amos with surprise, "thou wilt not sacrifice thy lamb, Bartimaeus." "It is an offering to God, Rabbi Amos." "But thy lamb leadeth thee everywhere. It is eyes to thee. Thou canst not do without it. And thy doves, thou earnest by them many a mite in a day. They are so well taught in cunning and pleasant tricks to please children. If thou wilt sacrifice, spare these so needful to thee, and here is money to buy doves and another lamb," answered my benevolent uncle. "Hear what I have to say," answered Bartimaeus. "My father became sick and was likely to die. The next day my mother, who has nourished my childhood and loved me though I was born blind with all her heart, was also taken sick. The same night my little blind daughter, whose face I never saw, and who never saw her father's face, was sick nigh unto death. My father, my mother, my child are now restored, and in my joy I am on my way to the temple to offer these gifts of God to him. It will not be hard to part with them, since in giving all that I have I but show my love to God." With these words he went on, the lamb obeying the string which he held, softly moving on before, while I could see the sightless eyes of the righteous son and pious father trickled tears as he kissed and kissed again the precious doves that lay in his bosom. This little occurrence made me sad, yet I honored the resolute piety of this poor man, whose eyes, though they saw not men, seemed to see God and feel his presence. There is still humble piety in the land, my dear father, and finding it not among the proud and splendid priests, we must look for it in the hearts of the poor and humble, like Bartimaeus. Once outside the gates, the air blew fresh from the hills of olives. After being so long confined within the walls and narrow streets, it seemed to me that I had just broken out of my cage, like the pretty blue-headed turtle dove, and I felt like winging my way too to the free deserts. We had hardly reached the place where the two roads meet when we heard to the west the sound of the galloping of a large body of horse, and the next moment the young Roman centurion came in sight, riding at the head of a troop of horse whose martial appearance, with the ringing of their armor and the melody of their bugles, made my blood leap. Emilius looked like a prince, and his burnished armor shone in the sun like armor of fire. At his side rode a youth who bore the eagle of his band, but the centurion himself carried in his hand only the badge of his rank, which was a vine rod bound with rings of gold. He saluted us with that courtesy which distinguishes his every motion, and then, dividing his troop into two bodies, half of whom, trotting on ahead, led the van, and the other half falling behind, served as a rear guard. He then gave the word to move forward. Farewell, dear father, till my next, when I will resume my narrative of the events which have taken place since I left Jerusalem. The God of our father Abraham be your defense and shield. Your affectionate daughter, Adina.